$1,050,000 once, and $1,050,000 twice, and $1,050,000 for the third and final call.
In Australia's second biggest property market, buyers are holding their nerve.
All finished at $1,050,000. Well, the bids here, ladies and gentlemen, formally pass the property into this lady here. She'll have first exclusive rights at the vendor's reserve.
Behind closed doors and after some negotiation on price, Natalie manages to secure her first home. She wanted to get in ahead of what she expects will be a mad rush later this year.
It's definitely been difficult and stressful trying to figure out whether we'll be able to afford the mortgage repayments if interest rates go up, but hopefully now that they've started to settle, we should be okay.
Prices rose nationally by 0.4% in January and 8.7% over the year. It marked the 12th straight month of gains driven by Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane. Darwin and Sydney rose marginally, while Melbourne, Canberra and Hobart went backwards. Rents had their strongest monthly rise since last April, up 0.8%. Analysts expect Australia's housing market will continue to rise over the coming months, although affordability will remain an issue in some capital cities.
I think at the very least we'll expect some weakness in the more expensive pockets of the market, like Sydney and Melbourne. And then in the rental market, I'd expect to see continued increases, but possibly at a slower rate than what we saw in 2023.
We expect moderate falls in property prices this year, so falls averaging around 3 to 5% if unemployment rises significantly, and that could result in deeper falls in property prices.
At another auction in Melbourne, these first-time buyers are still getting priced out.
We initially started off looking for like a smaller townhouse, but then even those were kind of getting up there in price, so we thought might as well just kind of move further out and get a bit more space.
For those looking to break into the market, getting a home loan might be easier. The Reserve Bank is expected to keep rates on hold at its next meeting, but economists are tipping there'll be rate cuts later this year. Agents expect more first home buyers will return, opting for townhouses or newly renovated homes.
Eventually there'll be rate cuts, but they're buying for the long term. They're buying for the next 10 years.
0.69 confirming your bid, ma'am.
Regardless of when interest rates fall, agents say first home buyers face stiff competition from migrants and overseas buyers.
We do work with a few immigration agencies that have buyers that is not really affected by the interest rates. Now those buyers are a little bit more cashed up.
Final call now at 169.
Pushing the Australian dream for some further out of reach.
While home buyers may be facing tough competition to enter the market, renters are facing a double whammy: a critical shortage of properties and increasingly unaffordable rent, even with the rollout of government assistance. I spoke with Louis Christopher, the founder of property research firm SQM. Louis Christopher, welcome to The Business. CoreLogic says average rents nationally hit an all-time high in December, and yesterday's inflation data shows rental price growth is starting to slow. Is this the good news we've been waiting for?
Rental price growth has slowed a little on the ABS numbers. This is true. It's down now to about 7.5% for the past 12 months. However, when we consider market rents as measured by asking rents, we're still seeing some steep rises out there in the community. So on our measurement of asking rents over the past 12 months, they're up by about 11%. And we do know that feeds through into the ABS's official measure of actual rents eventually. So we can expect over the course of 2024 that we'll keep recording elevated growth in actual rents, which naturally feeds through into the CPI basket.
Can you give us a sense of why the CPI numbers are different to the asking rent? It's because they feed into the CPI numbers eventually.
There is a lag between what the market price is in versus what tenants actually pay, particularly longer term tenants. So If a property has become unoccupied and it's been re-advertised from, say, originally $900 a week it was previously rented for, it's now been advertised at $1,000, okay, a new tenant will pay $1,000 and that feeds through into the asking rent series. If, on the other hand, that property stays rented between the landlord and the existing tenant for a number of years, that landlord may take some time to feed through the market rent through to that actual tenant for some reasons, because they like the tenant and they don't wish to rock the boat. So that's the reason why you see a lag between the two data sets. But the evidence is quite simple and plain. It does eventually feed through into the actual series recorded by the ABS eventually.
Well, yesterday's CPI shows that rental growth was 0.9%. Without government rent assistance, that would have been 2.2%. Has the Commonwealth Rental Assistance Program helped, or is it just more money for tenants ending up in landlords' pockets?
Yeah, really good question. It's helped for now, as we can see with the series. We did see a little bit of a fall for the quarter in terms of the growth rate. My concern is, though, that this will be a relatively short-term phenomena, and what we will see is, as you point out, that it will feed through into landlords' pockets. Ultimately, we're just throwing more money at a fixed supply situation relative to the population, and that, I believe, will feed through into higher rents eventually.
So are these record high rents making buying become a more attractive option?
No doubt renters would be looking to be first home buyers as much as they can, but given elevated interest rates at this point in time, and the reality right now is for a first home buyer, they're looking at an average lending rate close to 7%. That makes the proposition very tough to get into the housing market. For a number of cities, not all cities, we're still seeing some relatively good affordability in cities such as Adelaide, Hobart, Perth, Darwin, but on the East Coast it's particularly tough right now for first home buyers to get into the market, and that's where rental conditions are also extremely tough in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane as well. So for first home buyers and renters, right now I'm sure many younger people will be feeling very cornered.
And we heard in the earlier story that the relative price gap between houses and units has widened. Obviously there's land attached to houses, but is there more to it than land? Why such demand for houses?
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. We've noticed in more recent years that in up markets, house prices seem to rise faster than unit prices, whereas in down markets, house prices fall faster than unit prices. Unit prices tend to be more stable, in other words. Given the rises in population, I do believe for 2024 we're likely to see an increase in demand for units over houses, and that should mean that unit prices will not fall as much as what house prices will for this year. Keeping in mind our forecast, or SQM's forecast, is that we will see some moderate to modest house price falls over the course of 2024.
More broadly, we know there's a housing shortage. Is freeing up land in existing suburbs and building more apartments along rail lines, for example, the answer to supply?
Oh, it's part of the answer. There's no silver bullet in trying to address our housing affordability. Unfortunately, over the course of the next 12 months, it does appear as though the number of dwelling completions is actually set to fall over 2023. So for last year, we built about 170,000 dwellings. This year, based on the building approval numbers, we're set to build about 150,000 dwellings. Problem with that, though, is that for last year, we should have built 240,000 dwellings just to keep the rental market stable. We didn't. We built only about 170,000. And so I'm quite concerned about the outlook for supply going forward. And yes, building along railway lines will help, but we need to do much, much more. We need to hit the government's target of 1.2 million dwellings over 5 years. And we need to build a lot more inner urban dwellings, and we need to consider increasing opportunities in our regional townships, which will encourage the population to consider living outside our largest capital cities.
And you touched on it before. What's your prediction for home prices and rental prices in 2024?
Our forecast for home prices over the course of 2024 is really a mixed market depending on the city we're discussing. For the east coast of Australia, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, we believe we will record falling housing prices in the order of about 0 or steady to about -4% for our two largest capital cities. We believe Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide in particular are going to rise fairly substantially. We're looking at price rises in those cities of somewhere between about 7 to perhaps 10%. We're most bullish, for lack of better words, on the Perth market, where we believe current elevated commodity prices and an extraordinarily tight rental market in Perth is going to push housing prices up by double digits this year, despite the elevated interest rate environment.
And for rental prices?
Unfortunately, the outlook for rents is that we are going to record another year of rises. I do agree the abatements, the rebates have helped tenants for now, but the outlook is still quite negative given the shortage that we have of accommodation.
Louis Christopher, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.